The horse's hooves kicked up clouds of red dust, each step a drumbeat against the empty canyon. Daniel Cross leaned low in the saddle, sweat stinging his eyes, his fingers white around the reins. The wind tore at his coat, carrying the scent of sun-baked earth and dry sage. Somewhere ahead, a ridge cut the sky in jagged lines, and he knew he'd have to cross it before nightfall. A snap of a twig froze him. His horse whinnied, ears pricked, nostrils flaring. From behind a twisted mesquite, a shadow emerged. Small, human. The desert had eyes, and tonight it had found him. The figure stepped closer. A young Apache woman, dark-eyed and quiet, her hands brushing the long grass. She didn't speak. She didn't run. She only watched. Daniel's hand hovered near the saddle horn, but he said nothing. The air hung thick, heavy with tension, as if the canyon itself waited for the first move. The horse shifted nervously, scraping the stones, and Daniel felt the old ache in his bones. Years of riding, years of running, years of losing, all of it pressed against him in a single heartbeat. The woman's gaze didn't waver. She tilted her head slightly, curious, unafraid. Daniel noticed the dirt under her fingernails, the way the sun caught strands of hair like fire. A strange calm settled over him, a whisper that told him she wasn't a threat. The horse stumbled. Daniel dropped the reins for a heartbeat, steadying the animal with both hands. The girl's lips parted as she stepped forward, offering a small skin of water. Dust from the path clung to her skin, making her seem part of the earth itself. "Thank you," Daniel murmured, voice rough like gravel. His eyes lowered, studying her hands, the way she held herself, strong, gentle, unyielding. He wanted to ask her name, but the words froze in his throat. A gust of wind swept across the canyon, lifting the red dust like ghosts dancing in the dying light. The horse shivered, and Daniel felt the weight of every shadow in the desert pressing down. He glanced at her again. She was still there, still watching, still waiting. For a moment, the world narrowed to just them. A man who had lost too much, a girl who had seen too little. And in that fragile pause, something passed between them, something silent and impossible to name. The sun dipped behind the cliffs, bleeding red across the horizon. Daniel tightened his grip on the reins, pulled his coat closer against the wind, and let the horse take its step forward. The girl followed him a few paces, her eyes never leaving his back. The desert swallowed their footprints, but the memory of that first meeting, quiet, tense, alive, would linger long after. The storyteller would later say, "That night, the desert saw mercy where it had only known dust and silence." The fire crackled, throwing flickering shadows across Daniel's weathered face. Smoke curled toward the sky, blending with the first stars pricking the darkening heavens. Naya sat a few paces away, knees pulled close, eyes reflecting the flames as she traced patterns in the sand with her fingers. "Why do you ride alone?" she asked softly, voice barely more than the sigh of wind through the mesquite. Daniel didn't answer at once. He stared into the fire, seeing the echoes of towns and faces long gone. The desert had a way of pulling the past from a man, whether he wanted it or not. "I've lost things," he said finally, voice low. "People I cared about. Folks who didn't make it through." He tossed a small ember aside. It hissed against a rock. "Sometimes you ride to forget, sometimes to remember." Naya tilted her head, curiosity sharpening. "Do white people make children?" she asked, her words hesitant, eyes wide. "Do they make children the same way?" Daniel's heart skipped. He looked at her, the innocence in her gaze, the trust. For a moment, he thought the desert itself had stilled, holding its breath. He cleared his throat, searching for words that wouldn't shatter the fragile wonder in her eyes. "Well," he began, scratching at the dirt near the fire. "It's complicated. It takes more than wishing or wanting. It's about love and commitment. Two people coming together, caring for each other." His words stumbled, awkward but honest. Naya's face lit with a mixture of confusion and awe. "So white people make children this way?" she asked again, a hint of wonder creeping in her voice. "Can I try too?" Daniel froze. The fire's warmth felt suddenly small against the weight of her question. He wanted to explain, to shield her from the truths that had torn his own heart apart. He leaned closer, speaking softly. "Not like that," he said. "Love, it doesn't happen because you try. It grows, slow as the cactus blooms after the rain. You can't rush it, and you can't force it." Naya's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. She didn't fully understand, but she nodded. She seemed content to watch the sparks dance, as if she were learning secrets the desert had whispered for centuries. A coyote's howl split the night. Daniel glanced toward the horizon, muscles tensing, but the moment didn't break. Instead, it lingered, a fragile connection, a bridge between worlds. He looked at her, and for the first time in years, he felt something resembling hope. The storyteller's voice would later say, "Two hearts understood something that night that the desert itself could not explain, that even in the quiet, even in the dust, there could be wonder." Hooves thundered across the canyon floor before the first glint of steel caught Daniel's eye. Dust spiraled into the air, red against the rising blood moon. 3 riders appeared on the ridge, silhouettes hard and jagged, eyes cold with the promise of death. "They're close," Daniel muttered, hand brushing the revolver at his hip. Naya crouched behind the fire, her small frame tense, heart hammering. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She simply watched, as though sensing that the desert itself had grown dangerous. "Cross," one rider called, voice ragged and mocking. "We've been looking for the butcher of Bisbee. Thought you disappeared." Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't flinch. The name was a ghost he had buried beneath years of sand and sun, but it had followed him, always trailing like a shadow. The riders laughed, spurs clinking against their saddles. One raised his rifle, the barrel gleaming under the blood moon. "Step out, old man, and maybe we'll be quick about it." Daniel's fingers curled around the gun, but he stayed low, silent. Naya stepped closer to him, eyes wide, and whispered, "Who? Who are they?" "They're men who think they know me," he said, voice cold as stone. "Men who shouldn't have come." Suddenly, the first rider lunged down the slope, metal glinting. Daniel moved before thought could catch him, spinning in the saddle with deadly precision. Shots rang out, echoing through the canyon like jagged lightning. Sand and blood sprayed in every direction. Naya's breath hitched as the second rider swung wide, aiming for her. Daniel's pistol barked twice, and the man toppled, horse and rider rolling into the dust. The third tried to flee, but Daniel was faster, moving like a shadow from his past. A single shot cut the reins of the escaping horse. The rider tumbled hard into the rocks. When the echoes faded, only the wind stirred the dust. 2 lay lifeless, one screaming into the dunes, never to be seen again. Naya stared, trembling but not from fear. "I'll course through her like wildfire." "You fight," she whispered. "You fight like thunder." Daniel didn't smile. He cleaned the sweat and blood from his hands with a rag, eyes dark beneath the brim of his hat. "No," he said, voice low. "I fight like a man who's tired of it. Tired of being hunted. Tired of remembering." The fire they had left burning flickered weakly, smoke twisting toward the moon. Naya knelt beside him, hands pressed to the dirt as though to keep the moment rooted, alive. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The desert returned to silence, heavy and waiting. Only the blood-red moon lingered above, a witness to the violence and the mercy that had unfolded beneath it. The storyteller would later say, "That night, the desert learned that even killers could find peace, and that peace, when cornered, could draw blood." The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the faint smell of sage and smoke from a fire long cold. A cabin stood alone against the cliffs, its timbers worn and gray, windows catching the last light of a dying sun. Inside, a small group of children sat cross-legged, listening to a story that had never grown old. "They say he was the outlaw," one boy whispered, eyes wide. "The butcher of Bisbee." Naya smiled, brushing a strand of hair from a freckled child's forehead. "And they say he was just a man who wanted peace," she said softly, voice carrying the weight of decades. "A man who learned that mercy could live even in the dustiest places. The children leaned closer, imagining the canyon under a blood-red moon, the echo of hooves, the flash of gunmetal, the fear and awe that had once stirred the desert itself. Outside, the wind lifted, rattling the cabin door like a chorus of ghosts. At the edge of the fire pit, an empty chair creaked. Daniel's hat rested on the seat, brim folded into shadow. His presence lingered, felt in every whisper of the wind, every quiet footstep across the cabin floor. The children didn't see him, but they knew. They could feel the strength that had once saved them all, the courage that had turned a hunted man into a legend. "They say she was the mother of the borderlands," another child whispered. "The woman who tamed the desert." Naya's eyes shimmered, remembering the first night she had seen Daniel ride through the red dust. How fragile hope had seemed, and yet how alive it had grown between them. She pressed a hand to the fire-scarred table, feeling the heartbeat of a life built from danger and love. A distant coyote called, its howl stretching across the canyon like an old song. The wind carried it inside, weaving through the rafters, lifting the stories, lifting the memories. Naya glanced at the horizon, where the cliffs glowed with the last embers of sunset, and she whispered to the children, "Remember this, bravery is not only in the fight. It is in the love you protect, the lives you touch, and the peace you leave behind." The cabin fell silent but alive, each heartbeat a drumbeat echoing the desert's rhythm. The stars appeared, sharp and cold above the mesa, each one a witness to the legend that had begun with dust and curiosity, with firelight and fear, with a man who fought and a woman who believed. And the storyteller would say, voice rough as old leather and full of wonder, "If you ride past Red Mesa tonight, you might see a fire burning where two hearts once carved a life from the wilderness. You might hear laughter, and the desert will remember. And if you listen closely, you might still hear their secret whispered on the wind." The canyon held its breath. The legend was alive, waiting for the next traveler brave enough to find it.